Hi, we're team number 5, and this is our timeline for for the nature of life. Carlos Linnaeus in 1735 set the rules to the classification system in his book Systema Naturae. He determined that species would be ordered in hierarchical and taxonomic categories.
In 1744, evolution. The term evolution is used to refer to series of natural processes that contribute to change the generic characteristics of a species and lead them to continually adapt to the variable environmental conditions or inclusively to become extinct when the species don't poses enough variation to respond to drastic changes.
Computer from 1774. Computer from believed that things change over time with chance. He also assumed that Earth was the least 75 million years old. He thought that humans and apes are related. However, he didn't share his view to the general public, but he did hide his views in a limited edition book called History Natural.
And then, in 1809, Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck explained the origin of the first living beings. He thought that from microbes descent through continuous modifications all the plant and animal species that inhabit the world.
George Cuvier, 1812. George Cuvier was a strong supporter of the idea of catastrophe. This meant that plants and animals that were living in areas struck by sudden natural disasters, such as floods and hurricanes, would have been killed off and new life moving in from different areas. Charles Lyell, 1830. Charles Lyell was the major supporter of the idea of uniformity. This theory was first developed by another scientist from the 18th century by the name of James Hutton. Lyell believed that in uniformity, which meant that he believed that process that happened before the earth will happen again.
20 years later, in 1850, Louis Pasteur designed an experiment in which he demonstrated that organic matter soups that had been sterilized followed by isolation from the environment didn't decompose.
Alfred Russel, 1855. Alfred Russel Wallace had researched many of the same conclusions that Charles Darwin had reached. However, Wallace had developed a theory of natural selection before Darwin had published any of his work. He believed that organisms switch for their environment, will survive, and then pass their traits down to their offspring.
Then, in 1859, History of Evolution. At first, naturalists that studied animals and plants thought that species were permanent or immutable, but Buffon and Lamarck gave some theories to prove otherwise, although none of them have proof. So finally, Charles Darwin came with the natural selection theory.
Charles Darwin, 1859. Charles Darwin reached many of the same conclusions that Russell Wallace had reached, and he believed in natural selection. When he was 23, he bought a boat called the HMS Beagle to travel around the world. One of his most interesting observations during his trip was the finches of the Galapagos Islands.
In 1866, Ernst Haeckel answered the intellectual challenge that the microbial world posed. Also, he created a system of 3 kingdoms of living things: Animalia, Plantae, and Protista.
In 1878, the evidence of evolution. One of the first evidence that come to mind is fossils. Fossils are remains of the hard and most resistant parts of some living beings from the past, they may remain in a complete or fragment manner.
On 1881, José Eleuterio González. José Eleuterio González elicited that the study of pharmacy obtained a scientific category stemming from his systematic studies on the flora, which culminated in his catalog of plants of Nuevo León.
Then, in 1923, Alexander Ivanovich Oparin proposed that life on Earth had originated in a primary atmosphere different from ours, proposed that the first living beings, unicellular and anaerobic microbes, must have risen from inorganic matter, which transformed by a process of chemical evolution into organic molecules.
In 1925, Edward Chaton. He published a work in which he presented the diversity of living beings with a template where biodiversity was classified under a different assumption to that of kingdoms.
In 1927, George Lamarck, he proposed the Big Bang Theory. He deduced that the universe didn't collapse upon itself due to the fact that gravity was countered by more powerful force, or originating from a great explosion that impulsed all matter from a point where it was gathered in the remote past.
1939, Herbert Copeland separated bacteria from the protista, and with this experiment, he created the fourth kingdom.
In 1948, George Gamow, he predicted that starting from an indefinitely dense and heated beginning of matter, which caused a great explosion, an enormous amount of photons must release through the cosmos.
Then in 1915, Harold Urey and Stanley Miller, they proved that the heterotroph hypothesis, that is, that the one that sustains that in primate Earth there was a constant process of chemical evolution of reduced inorganic matter which gave place to organic molecules and the molecules of life.
In 1959, Robert Whittaker. He argued about a reality hidden from the sight of all biologists. He documented a wide variety of species and found that some of them were not plants but fungi, thus creating a fifth kingdom. In 1960, Alexander Rich, Carl Woese, and Leslie Orgel and Francis Crick. They proposed the existence of a first biologic world based on RNA molecules, previous to the one we presently know, based on DNA, RNA, and proteins.
Next year, Juan Roa proposed that the presence of organic molecules in meteorites indicates that such compounds form practically at the same time on Earth and in these bodies during the first stages of the formation of the solar system.
In 1980, the world of RNA, small compounds of molecules of RNA were discovered in living beings that perform catalytic function of molecular compound in a manner analog to enzymes.
In 1998, Margulis and Schwartz. They both published a book titled Five Kingdoms, which included descriptions, photographs, and schematizations of species representative of each kingdom. Thank you for your attention, and this is the end of our timeline.